Hi guys, Donald Trump doesn't like things he doesn't understand. And like his supporters, instead of actually getting informed, he prefers to remain ignorant and angry. The president was in Davos where he spoke incoherently about his experience with the EU before he became president, involving something in Ireland. He then attacked Europe for treating America and American companies badly. What was this all about, and what does it mean for US EU relations? Have a listen.
I want to talk about the EU because you mentioned specifically that I've also had a lot of friends and leaders of countries. I've gotten to know them all my first term and a little bit during this period of 4 years, and know them well, like them a lot, but they're very frustrated because of the time everything seems to take to get approved, environmental impact statements for things that you shouldn't even have to do that, and many, many other ways that it takes. And I'm going to give you a quick little example. In the private life, my beautiful private life, before I had all these things happening, the world is a little different. I had a nice, simple life. You knew that. But when I had that simple life, I did projects. And I had a big project in Ireland. And it had to get approval on something that would have made it even better. And I got the approval from Ireland in a period of a week. And it was a very, very efficient, good approval. And they informed me, though, the problem is you're going to have to get it from the EU, and we think that'll take 5 to 6 years. And they said, you have to be kidding. And this was before politics. And I said, wait a minute, it's not that important. I don't want to go 5 or 6 years, but it would have been a big investment. It would have been nice, and it would have been good for the project. And I sent the people to the EU to see if they could speed it up, and basically it was a 5 or 6 year wait just to get a simple approval that Ireland gave me in a period of literally not much more than a week. And I realized right then, that was the first time I really was involved with the EU, but I realized right then that's a problem, and I didn't even bother applying to do it. Or if I did, I pulled it very quickly. I have to be very accurate because I don't want to be criticized. He did apply, actually. No, I want to be very accurate. So,
does this make any sense to anyone? Oh my goodness. Don't worry, there's more, and it's worse. So he tried to apply for some sort of change within a business in Ireland. Doesn't specify what business, what the change was. And in Ireland, he could do it in a week, but in the EU, and he sent people to the EU, and then he decided, I'm not going to go. Does anyone actually believe what he's saying here, even if it made sense?
I don't think I did, but if I did, I pulled it very quickly. It was just something you couldn't wait 5 years or 6 years to get an approval. So a lot of, in a very big business sense, a lot of people are claiming that's the problem. From the standpoint of America, the EU treats us very, very unfairly, very badly. They have a large tax that we know about, and a VAT tax, and it's a very substantial one. They don't take essentially don't take.
Okay, so what he's talking about here is VAT. And if you're selling goods into the EU, you have to apply VAT. Like suppliers in the EU have to apply VAT. I don't know what the problem here is. Like, if you want to sell goods into the EU, you have to compete with EU producers, and they're applying VAT to goods. So the US has to do the same if it's selling goods into the EU. That's the rules and the regulation. If you want to sell goods into the US, you have to follow US rules. If you sell goods into the EU single market, you have to follow EU single market rules.
Our farm products, and they don't take our cars, yet they send cars to us by the millions.
There's a problem with US cars. Not all US cars are rejected in Europe. Many cars, for example, the Tesla Cybertruck is not legal to drive in the EU, and it's not legal to drive in Britain because it doesn't meet the standards necessary, the safety standards or the regulations necessary. So if you don't meet those regulations, then you can't sell. Like, we apply this to any country in the world. If you're trying to sell into the single market, you have to meet those standards. The same way applies to the US. People in other countries can't just sell anything they want into the US. It has to meet certain standards.
They put tariffs on things that we want to do. Like, for instance, I think they actually, in terms of these are non-economic or non-monetary tariffs, and those are very bad, and they make it very difficult to bring...
Was that an actual sentence? Okay. What he's talking about here is non-tariff barriers. But there are non-tariff barriers to the US as well. What the non-tariff barriers, for example, regulations. So, of course, if you want to sell into the EU, you have to follow EU regulations. The same again with the US. I don't know why he has a problem with the EU. The US applies the same different restrictions, but it does apply certain restrictions for imports.
Products into Europe, and yet they expect to be selling, and they do sell their products in the United States. So we have, hundreds of billions of dollars of deficits with the EU, and nobody's happy with it, and we're going to do something about it, but nobody's happy with it. So I think the EU has to speed up their process. Friends of mine that are in...
Sorry, the EU has to speed up what? What does the EU have to speed up? In order to satisfy whom? You? The EU has to change its rules and its regulations for its market in order to satisfy Donald Trump. Does that make any sense to even a Donald Trump supporter?
And some of the nations within the EU, great people, they want to be able to compete better, and you can't compete when you can't go through the approval process fast. There's no reason why it can't go faster. So, I'm trying to be constructive because I love Europe.
He's trying to give us advice. If you remove a lot of these rules and regulations, you'll be able to do just as well as us. Remove the safeguards for the environment, remove the safeguards for worker protections, remove all the things, remove all this regulation. The regulation that's there to protect, people, consumers, businesses from other businesses. Remove all of that, and it will satisfy Donald Trump. That's what we should be doing. We should be removing protections for us in order to make Donald Trump happy.
Of the countries of Europe, but the process is a very cumbersome one, and they do treat the United States of America very, very unfairly with the VAT taxes and all of the other taxes they impose. One other, just to finish up, I got a call from the head of a major airline, one of the biggest airlines in the world, and he said, "Sir, could you help us? What? Landing in Europe is brutal. They charge us fees for everything, and it's so unfair." I said, "How does it compare to China?" He said, it's much worse.
So what we should do is we should redirect all our flights to China. So if anyone wants to arrive in Europe, they avoid Europe, they just fly to China, and then arrive to cities in Europe by bus or by train. It's nonsensical thinking.
And the other thing, as you know, they took court cases with Apple, and they supposedly won a case that most people didn't think was much of a case. They won 15 or 16 billion from Apple. They won billions from Google. I think they're after Facebook for billions and billions. These are American.
Okay, so what he's talking about here is, of course, Ireland, and how certain businesses in Ireland, which are from the United States, have been funneling money through the Irish tax system in order to avoid paying all their taxes. Treating Ireland somewhat, not completely, but somewhat like a tax haven. And the EU have said you can't continue to do that. And this is what Trump is talking about. See, when it comes to companies like Facebook, Apple, Google, and others who are benefiting from a lower corporation tax rate in Ireland, the EU is not too happy with that. Other EU member states are not happy with that. The US maybe are not. Some aspects of the US political system are not happy with that because they would prefer these companies in the US. But these companies are benefiting from that, and they want to maintain that. So they would like to see Donald Trump pick fights with the EU because they are the ones who will benefit from it. And the Irish government has been on the side of Apple and on these large corporations because, well, it suits the Irish government. But there's a bit of conflict between the Irish government and the EU. So when Donald Trump is talking about how the EU is punishing American companies, the EU is saying if you want to play ball, you have to follow our rules.
Companies, whether you like them or not, they're American companies, and they shouldn't be doing that. And that's, as far as I'm concerned, it's a form of taxation. So we have some.
Okay. Everything is taxation, and taxation is bad. He doesn't understand the EU. He doesn't seem to understand trade. He doesn't understand tariffs. He doesn't understand a lot of things. And instead of actually getting informed, he prefers to be angry, just like his supporters. Now, is this going to impact relations between the US and the EU? I think so. I think Trump wants to pick a fight with the EU. There are people within his administration who certainly want to pick a fight with the EU, and they want to go down the road of fewer and fewer regulations. But if the US wants to sell its goods into the single market, it will have to follow EU rules in the same way as if the EU wants to sell goods into the US market, as to follow US rules. We're not going to get away from that. But I think Trump and his administration are going to try and create problems with the EU. And I think, for example, when it comes to the United Kingdom, they need to pick a side. Donald Trump is not going to be there forever. The EU is going to be the UK's biggest market for the foreseeable future. So it makes sense for the UK to side with the EU. But then if it does, it's going to receive the wrath of Donald Trump. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.